dear participants in the program, Young Generation will Change Ukraine. The very fact that there are a few ambassadors here with us testifies how important they think that this program is. They obviously believe in it, otherwise they would have not been so utterly helpful from the very beginning and really made it actually possible, made it functional. Other ambassadors, by the way, from the countries that we started, also first said they would be here, but you know, there is such a political activity of a very, very heightened, at a very heightened tempo, and therefore a few of them simply had to, in the last minute, apologize and say could not be with us. But the reasons were real. I can give an example. Our good friend and colleague, Swedish ambassador, has organized a Swedish-Ukrainian business forum taking place all day. They actually started last night, in which there will be some representatives of the biggest Swedish companies, and there will be some representatives from the Ukrainian business side, some people from the government, and they will be discussing how Swedish companies can renew, increase, start their investments in Ukraine. I think this is a very important event. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Carl Bildt, former Prime Minister of Sweden, happened to be a very good friend, was there as an example, and a Polish ambassador, for example, had to be involved in something where our new President Poroshenko is involved, etc. So first of all, I really wanted to thank you. Jan Tombinski, the representative, the ambassador of the European Union to Ukraine, had also happily volunteered to be with us. But again, as you can well imagine, and what is happening now between Ukraine and the European Union, he had to desist. I'll put it that way. Now, but the fact that you, the participants in this program, out here, all with shining eyes, all full enthusiasm, is equally strong testimonial to the fact that the program is functioning. In fact, it's functioning beyond and above my expectations. And I would say even above my dreams. You know, I start everything with dreams. So I dreamt in writing that book, Почалась, in meetings with you, just how it should function. And it is functioning better than I expected, than as I even dreamt of. So I'm very proud of you. But I must say also, there is a sort of joy, because I've learned a great deal from you, as all of us who work at the foundation have. And now, of course, now that we have gone through Maidan, then we have experienced Russian aggression, and that we do have a new president, that we have and will have new government. It will be completed soon. And I hope that we will have new Verkhovna Rada, new parliament. All that, of course, facilitates the functioning of this program. It does not make it irrelevant, on the contrary, because we are still in this state that Ukraine has a great potential. It has a great potential because it has all the natural resources that a country would wish to have. And more importantly, it has the quality of human capital that is just incredibly high. And actually, you have proven it. Knowledgeable, dedicated, and so much so many people in your age groups are really so motivated to try and do something together for Ukraine, which means the transformation without revolution, this is our motto, is underway, it's accelerating, and everything will happen a little bit more sooner than we had planned, we had expected. It does put some strain on us, on the staff, even actually on our finances, because the program is also increased. As you know, last year there are 14 groups that completed the first phase of the program and that studied on the internet, met with ambassadors of their chosen country, did, with the help of the ambassadors, go to the country in concern, met with people in the right institutions of the state, discussions with them, came back, wrote articles about it, or spread the knowledge about it in the public. And then, as many of you remember, we had this wonderful conference on the 5th of December. You're all on the way down, but you all came to that conference. And the group saved had been to Sweden, talked among themselves to compare what they have concluded, what are the best lessons they can draw from the Swedish experience. Then they would talk to those that have been to Switzerland, to those that have been to Austria, but to my surprise, at the end of the day, they've already produced, well, calling it a blueprint is perhaps not adequate, but let me call it a blueprint of the architecture of the future societal order. Because again, what is our ultimate objective? To transform Ukraine so it would have the same 4 characteristics that the countries that we are studying now repeat. And I kept repeating it often. It's utterly important. Country in which there will be total political freedom. Country in which there will be a reasonable level of economic well-being for the whole population. There should be rich, they're necessary to invest, etc. But there should be no poor, certainly not in a country, a rich country, potentially like Ukraine. Thirdly, there should be social justice in science, in education, healthcare, pensions. And fourthly, there should be a real symbiosis between the population of the country and the biosphere. And I think this was a plan, this was a dream, and I think we are marching at an accelerated pace toward that. For this year, already 20 groups have been formed, mostly spontaneously, and this actually puts a little bit of burden on us and the staff, and I would say even a little bit on the embassies concerned. So we are searching also for the ways of how perhaps to get some other institutions to help. We have some plans about it. And since we do everything very openly, when we started the program, I did not want to have anybody, particularly not from outside, not from abroad, to help with the financing of this institution. That's why I created this fund. So nobody could accuse us. Remember, our beloved leader Yanukovych was still there. And I did not want somebody to accuse the foundation that it is actually sponsored or dreamt up, planned, sponsored, financed by outsiders. By now, that there is this change situation, we actually have explored the ways of getting some additional funding because the program is expanding, and also we had some losses because hryvnia had lost a little bit of its value. But there are plans, and so with great optimism, I'm looking forward to it. And of course, you could see it when I was meeting, I believe, almost every one of you during the registration period. What I'd like to do now is to invite the president of this wonderful institution, with which I had a little bit to do, to coordinate, because we are grateful to her for the fact she offered the use of the facilities, which I think are nice facilities, free of any charge. And I would say she even offered with pleasure. So, Irena, William.
Good morning, dear participants. Good morning, dear Excellency, Your Excellency, Investors. You know, I am very glad that this event, this annual meeting of this Bogdan Gavrilishvili Foundation are in our institute. Our institute is a dream of Bogdan Gavrilishvili. Institute was founded in 1989. It was a first business school in the former Soviet Union. Anybody knows about business education at that time. It was a Soviet time, and nobody knows about MBA, business education, market economy. And this institution, this program of this institution, create the business climate in the former Soviet Union and later in Ukraine. And now this is the new stage of our existence. The last 22 years of our independence, of course, changed a lot in our life. But now we have to change a lot in our life again. Again, we have created the new climate, the new attitudes, the new economy, the new politics, and this is, of course, your ideas, the future generation. And that's why I am very glad that this annual meeting in our institute. So, welcome to the IMI. I would like to wish you a good, productive work during the day, and I'm sure that this is a very important and very good meeting and project and everything that always Bogdan Gavrilishvili do is on the up level. And if we can help you, please contact us, and we do this with pleasure. Thank you.
Decentralization is a very important topic these days for Ukraine. Yesterday, Mr. Poroshenko in Warsaw talked about decentralization. Even before that, in Ukraine, you're aware there was a number of roundtables organized to reach out to all parts of Ukraine to find out what the regions want. And there were 3 roundtables so far. And decentralization was a recurring theme. We had people in the roundtable, we had representatives of OSCE, we had a special representative of the OSCE chairman, which is the Swiss president in this year, who reached out to the regions, and decentralization, power sharing between center and the region was always a subject. So it comes as no surprise that Mr. Poroshenko mentioned decentralization as a very important issue yesterday. He said he plans this Ukraine settlement. He has something like a political settlement plan, which he plans to propose on Saturday, on the day when he takes up office. And he didn't reveal too much of the plan, which makes sense, because you want to surprise people, you want to come with fresh ideas. But decentralization was already mentioned by him yesterday as one of the key elements of this Poroshenko political settlement plan. So I think the choice you did, I'm not sure if you had prior information about the issue, but I think it was a very well chosen subject. Now, as I said before, Switzerland has a decentralized political system, but with it will not be done the same way that Ukraine will decentralize. Switzerland 160 years ago was a confederation of independent states, and these independent states in 1848 decided, after a short civil war, to pool more of their resources and become a federal state. So this was a bottom-up process. You had independent parts in the beginning, and they put together or shared some of their competencies, because they found out that they can be more performing if not everybody does the same things at the same time. At that time, 160 years back, each and every of the Swiss components, which are called cantons in Switzerland, and some of you in the audience have been there, they had their own armies, they had their own money, they had their own legal setup. So it was a system very much similar to the European Union. And I think Switzerland and the European Union share a lot of features. They are highly decentralized states, which leave a lot of competencies on low levels of government structure. And what is also very important, which have a control process of putting competencies on a higher level. If I look at the EU, I'm not sure if you will talk about, or given another subject, you speak about youth. Okay, so I can, if you admit, for a non-EU member country to speak positively about the EU has a very interesting model, I think. It is a controlled way of sharing competencies between sovereign member states. If you find out that you can be stronger if you share, if you pool your resources in the area of economy, you do it. You introduce a joint common currency, the euro, for those who are willing and able to share. So it's a very interesting model of shared competencies, and this is done in a controlled fashion. It has to go through the council, it has to go through the parliament. And Switzerland is very similar in that respect. In Switzerland, any new competencies are always allocated at the canton level. They are not allocated at the top level, at the national level, but if any new competence comes in, it's automatically at the canton level. And I think that's again something we share with the EU. If, for instance, emigrating to Mars will be a policy of the future, it will in Switzerland not be a national policy, it will be a canton policy, at least at the beginning, until people decide that they want to shift it to a higher level because it may be more practical and better allocated there. Now, given these two systems, the bottom-up system, which is the EU and the Swiss approach, and the top-down system, which will be the Ukrainian approach, which has been the Polish approach, which is the UK approach, for instance, I fully understand that Mr. Poroshenko yesterday said that the Polish model will be the model of the choice, because it has been tested, it comes from a similar political situation as the situation that Ukraine is in. So no bad feelings if you don't want to follow the Swiss model. And I probably would also not recommend to do it, because it has been developed over 160 years. It's very difficult to sort of replicate. But maybe on an intellectual level, it's still interesting to see how it is done. And I talked to my colleague, Mr. Klotzli, when we came here. Of course, it's not excluded that the top-down process and the bottom-up process may lead eventually to similar results of burden sharing, of competence sharing. So let me just give you, or would you like to read, please?
No, it's fine. I did not explain in the beginning that we planned for each of you to have 10 minutes, but we expanded it to 15 minutes so that there could be 1 or 2 questions asked.
Absolutely. Even more questions. Let's say if you have very burning questions, also come in at any moment of my presentation, if you want to come in at that moment, otherwise at the end. So you would advise me to speak maybe 4 or 5 more minutes or so, and then we go into questions and answers?
Yes.
Okay, good. And please, what I feel here in Ukraine, what I see very often, the monitors or the people administering a debate are too nice. They don't stop people. And I think sometimes it's a question of politeness for everybody to stop people who talk too long. And I think you should be nasty.
I'm capable of doing that.
Yes, I know, you're on fire. But this was a general remark for the Ukrainian majority here. Don't be too nice. Come in sometimes robustly. for the benefit of all. Okay, let me just give you shortly the way that competencies are shared in the Swiss case. And then I would ask Mr. Plötzky, my colleague, maybe to say something about the political backdrop of a decentralized system. It's more than just institutions, it's more than just competence sharing. It has also to do with what everybody in civil society and in the political sphere does. So just very shortly, in Switzerland we have 3 levels. We have the national level, we have the canton level, we have the city level, and each of them have major competencies. Many of the competencies are shared between different levels. Take, for instance, the fiscality. We have fiscal competence at all 3 levels. So if I'm back in Switzerland, I pay taxes to 3 levels. I pay national tax, I pay canton tax, I pay city tax. Which is not very nice, but anyhow, that's how it is. This also gives a lot of independence to all these levels. And we only have 1/3 of the income to the budget on the top level. I think it's even worse in the EU case. I think also in the EU, most of the resources are at member state level or below, and you are the poor guys at the top, but that's the situation as it is. So fiscal policy is at 3 levels. Foreign policy is only at 1 level, it's on national level. Security policy is also the top level. So for instance, Switzerland just 1 week back refuted to buy new fighter planes for one reason, I don't know now, but this was done on the national level and rejected by population also at the national level. Then we have many mixed competencies, as I said. Fiscal policy is a mixed policy. Economic policy is also a mixed policy. When it comes to economic policy, we have foreign economic policy, membership in WTO, negotiation of free trade agreements. That's of course at the national level. But the cantons have a lot of their say when it comes to economic policy, like investment policy. And the cantons really want to attract companies, and they have their own set of instruments. And they also compete against each other when they want to bring in foreign investment. And that's an interesting system in Switzerland. We have cooperation between the cantons, but we have also competition. So it's a competition-cooperation model, which sometimes leads to better results, because you cannot have very high taxes if you compete with other cantons for foreign investment. When it comes to language, language is also a competence at the national level and at the canton level. There are some few competencies on the national level. We have 4 national languages, we have 3 official languages, that's in the constitution. Then the cantons on their level deal with multilingualism, for instance. We have several cantons which are multilingual, which have French speakers, German speakers, and they themselves decide how they deal with the language issue. If they have all the laws in all languages, if they have a principle where the territory defines the language. Some areas who were French-speaking historically will remain French-speaking. Schools will always be taught in French, for instance. That's one of the solutions that is found on that level. Then universities, we have national universities, but only 2, and we have several universities at the canton level. So you see, it's a mixed picture. It's not easy to understand. There's competition, there's coordination, and there's a lot of financial flows between all the levels to make everybody not happy, but not too unsatisfied, so that everybody eventually wants to remain in the boat.
I would like to add one thing, that this year Switzerland has a presidency of Organization for Security Cooperation of Europe. And President of Switzerland actually is therefore president of that organization. And he has done very important things. It so happened I did have a very nice exchange of correspondence with him in January. Then I worked with the ambassador Bentley, who actually had to sort of really do the executive work of that. But President Burkhalter really enabled sort of to cause, maybe break the ice at any rate, in his discussion with Mr. Putin. He actually stopped him in some ways. So this is a very, very important important thing for Ukraine. And I would just add, so we should be grateful. It's a pity that 8 observers for elections that took place actually have been captured in Donetsk and in Luhansk. And we somehow hope they're not all Swiss, they have different nationalities, and we just hope that somehow they will be freed in some time. And maybe I'll just add for one thing. What is extremely important for Ukraine, and it's most impressive in Switzerland, is the system for education. Ambassador Schönberger mentioned the different things, but let's say every community is responsible for primary education up to 9 years. Cantons are responsible for university education. And then federal government is responsible for the 2 polytechnics, but is also responsible for the apprenticeship scheme. So, you know, the wonderful thing about the Swiss educational system, by the way, in Switzerland, people of your age, let's say from 18 to 24, it is the smallest percentage among all the developed countries that still continue their education in a formal way, that is, that go to universities. But the very important thing is this apprenticeship scheme. I will not describe it in detail because certainly the group that have been to Switzerland have learned about it. But what is a great thing about it, that the educational system produces certain skills. And in Switzerland, it happens to equate for demand of just those kind of skills. So for a long time in Switzerland, there was only 0.5% of unemployment. Geneva excluded, those that higher unemployment still has. But everywhere else, in fact, the Swiss worried that it's too little unemployment because it did not provide enough mobility. Now you can say something, but please do it briefly because we are beginning to rob the time from your successors.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen. Dear friends, I won't take too much time. It's just to add what Ambassador Schönberger said before on the institutional building in Switzerland with regard to federalization, decentralization, you name it. A reflection just which could be incorporated maybe in some seminar work which could be developed further, which is important in the structure. You can have excellent institutions, excellent structures, but what is important, or the most important factor, is still the human factor. So we have the right people at the right place, and this concerns especially the relation between citizen and the state. If you are a citizen and you don't have confidence in your institutions, or vice versa, if you are a state employee and you don't have confidence in your citizens, then you have not a same relation. You can pretend, as a citizen, you can pretend to pay taxes, and as a state employee, you can pretend to spend this money wisely. So for the Swiss case, we have made a good experience to put these relations on an equal footing, but this is based on confidence on the one side and reliability. So the confidence that people pay taxes, and the question that the state is spending the money wisely. This is just the example for the taxes, but it goes much further. I just wanted to add this as a small comment. Many more examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing that we have devoted to Switzerland a little bit more time than was foreseen, we'll postpone the questions to the ambassador, perhaps toward the end. And if I may now invite the ambassador of Norwegian Kingdom Ambassador Fredriksson, also to speak to us briefly. There is a topic also actually about members membership in the European Union, because to us it's interesting, why did Norway decide not to be a member of the European Union?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Well, to get this kind of topic, perhaps it's a little bit a negative way to start. You know, why did we not choose to join the EU? But I will try to stop at some points to perhaps explain why this happened, and also what kind of experiences we might have that could be of interest to Ukraine. The referendum on joining the EU was in 1994, so it's 20 years ago these days that we had this referendum. And there was quite a clear majority that voted against the membership. And you know, before I go into details, let me just tell you 2 words about Norway that you must keep in mind. Norway is a constitutional kingdom with a parliamentary system, where the power lies with the parliament, and the majority of the parliament then forms the government. And this has been the case for almost 100 years now. Of course, parliamentarism is something that developed, but more or less for 100 years. Norway is a centralized state. We have 19 regions, and there are about 460 municipalities, and there's a constant discussion whether we should get rid of the regions and just have the municipalities. So I think the tendency and the mood of things in Norway is to have, you know, a centralized government with the king as a symbolic figurehead, and then to have strong local communities. So the history is somewhat different from Switzerland, just to keep that in mind. Well, in 1994 there was a referendum. It was at the same time in Norway, Finland, Sweden, and other countries as well, Austria. I think there are 3 basic reasons why there was a majority that voted no. There's technical, political, and probably historical reasons as well. The technical reasons is probably that the government at that time, who was very much in favor of a membership, didn't really have a campaign that would catch on to people. There was a lot of technical arguments, a lot of economic arguments, and they didn't sort of bring home. And the referendum in Norway was especially designed to come after Sweden and Finland, because the government at that time calculated that if Sweden voted yes, so would the Norwegians. Didn't happen. Talking about politicians underestimating the will of the people, this is also, I think, a very actual question in recent developments in Ukraine. I think if you look at the political topics that made people say no, they are diverse. It depends on what region people live in, depends on what political stance they have to begin with. But some obvious economic facts. Norway's economy at that time, and still, based mostly on exports of raw materials like seafood and oil and gas. And that meant that most people understood that joining the EU would not actually make a very huge difference for the export economy. Or at least it seemed so at the time. In addition to that, a lot of the coastal population was extremely worried that the deal with the EU that was on the table would make it necessary for them to share more quotas with especially Spanish and Portuguese fishing fleets. These are very concrete measures, very concrete issues that were discussed at the time. And so you would see, if you look at the map, who voted no, who voted yes, the people, the coastal population all voted no. And the yes votes were basically in the big cities. Also, I think a very strong historical fact, Norway was at that time not even 100 years away from total independence. The backbone of the Norwegian identity is the constitution from 1814, but at that time Norway was still in a personal United Kingdom with Sweden. We gained total independence in 1905, so it was a relative young state that was holding a referendum and giving up a piece of sovereignty.
However, Finland gained independence even later than Norway and still voted yes at the same time. But I think, again, if you look into that matter, you will see there are very different reasons for that. But also, you know, in analyzing why we are not a member of the EU, there is a huge elephant in the room, and this elephant is very relevant to Ukraine. Because there was an option on the table already, which is called the EEA agreement, which meant there was a kind of EU light version on the table. And this is what actually happened, and there was consensus in the parliament that if there was a no vote, this would be the alternative. So people didn't really vote yes or no to standing completely outside the European community, to use that word. There was an option on the table, and that seemed to be very convenient. And still today, after 20 years, there is, I mean, the political parties will still say we are either pro-membership or we are against membership, but they will all agree that the EEA agreement works very well. And membership is not on the political agenda. And if you look at the polls, they still show a smaller, but still majority for not joining the EU. I don't think that would have been the case if it had not been for 20 years of the EEA agreement. That's my personal view, but shared by a lot of people.
Well, thank you for answering so well that question that was on purpose made somewhat provocatively. So we have the time now for a couple of questions, if somebody is interested. I would, maybe if you allow, I would add what had struck me the most about Norway, I would say Norwegian people, even more than Norwegian state. I remember there was a poll made, maybe 45 years ago. The question was, would you like to have an increase, it is when the petroleum started coming, would you like to have an increase in GDP per capita or maintain the environment in its present state? And the majority of people voted for maintaining the environment rather than having more GDP. Now it shows some basic values of the people. And the second extraordinarily striking thing is what Norway is doing with tremendous, let's say, gift from heaven, or manna from heaven, petroleum. Instead of consuming the revenues from that, they've created this fund for future generations. But that's almost, Norway is a very small country, in population at least, a huge fund, over $900 billion for future generations. I think Ukraine has a great deal to learn from this. Our values have changed, are changing, but on these 2 points, I think we can go a little bit further and really try to learn from the Norwegian experience. I personally found it wonderful. It's one of the reasons why I love the country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lauritzen. And if I may just add to that briefly before I finish, that I think that this arrangement we have with the EU is very relevant to Ukraine. The Association Free Trade Agreement that you are in the process of signing with the EU is, as far as I know, so to say, the second deepest agreement that the EU has with any country apart from the EEA agreement. And I'm quite sure if we start to work with Ukraine and go into some details, there will be a lot of experiences that we have from the last 20 years that could be very much relevant to the new government in Ukraine. And this is about legislation, it's about how the institutions to look like, to function in that setting. It's probably also, you know, how can you get a maximum gain from this kind of agreement, which is not obvious always, I think. And also how to influence the EU in a democratic and transparent way. Let me just say one thing, which is obvious perhaps, but still. I am convinced that the agreement that Ukraine is now signing with the EU will not work unless there is very quickly transition to rule of law in Ukraine. I think if you look at Norway, this agreement that we have with the EU only works because we have rule of law. If not, these agreements tend to be a piece of paper, and you will still have to negotiate every single issue from time to time, from issue to issue, and you will have sort of a domestic area which is not very well adapted to this kind of agreement. So I think rule of law should be priority number one, not easily done overnight, but still I think this must come into place. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for having interrupted you, because you did make an extremely important point about this. And let's say, as a good news is the fact that the President of the European Union had declared yesterday, I believe, that the economic part of the Agreement of Association will be signed by the 27th of this month, of June, which is extremely important news. So maybe EU has compensated for being perhaps a bit slow, inadequate in its reactions to Russian aggression. But this will be a very nice compensation for that. But if I may now invite the ambassador of Austria, Ambassador Heim, and maybe just add the fact that the embassy is doing some very interesting things, particularly some wonderful publications. One of them, it is in Ukrainian, or they are in Ukrainian. One of them is about Joe Schumpeter, who was a professor in Chernivtsi. Then he had gone to Switzerland to do another doctorate, and then to Austria, where he became actually, well, I would say, one of the very best economists, wise economists. There are not many wise economists of the 20th century. Now, there's another book about the state building, etc. So I wanted to thank him again, not only for the fact that, again, from the very beginning, he has been most helpful in this program, but also for this type of work that they are doing for Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Myself, I'm very happy to be here. I think this is a wonderful program that you have organized, and I will be able to refer to some of the speakers in the afternoon and try to cut my intervention short. Also, the books, thank you very much. Unfortunately, the Schumpeter book is out of print, but I think it's one that, despite more than 100 years have gone by since it's been published, it is extremely relevant. Schumpeter's theory on economic development, I think, lays some of the groundwork of what we are talking about, the free trade agreement with the European Union in a wider European area. And by the way, I don't quite agree with what you said at the very ending, that the EU has been awfully slow in reacting to the Russian aggression. I think the EU very often is misunderstood as a union that covers all kinds of disciplines and competences, which it doesn't really. The European integration, to me, and in Austria, by the way, also 25 years ago, sent a letter to Brussels that Austria would like to join the European Commission and unions as they were at the time, communities. At the time when the Soviet Union and the embassy in Vienna sent us a diplomatic note of protest with reference to the State Treaty in 1955, which gave Austria full sovereignty after the Second World War. So some of these things maybe remind you some other events. 20 years ago, exactly to the date, Austria had a referendum on joining the European Union, and despite lengthy debates and an overall unclear picture, there was a very clear 2/3 majority at the time for Austria to join at the same time as Finland and Sweden, the European Union. That just as a reference to before. My topic is more on education and culture, and I'll try not to speak too much on that and make reference to the other two books. I brought some copies and they're more available. One is the second edition of Ukrainsko-Avstrijski Sutrici, which we published late last year in both languages. And I think most of the participants and scholars who have traveled to Austria have had a look at those. There are some more copies available. I brought some, but if anyone is interested, will be able to send them or hand them over. Let me just go back a few years when I first heard about your activities, your program. I was quite impressed actually, and I'm proud that you chose Austria as one of the subjects of interest as a source of inspiration for your approach, and I'm equally impressed with the publication method to regroup different personalities with different backgrounds, different disciplines, and provide them with the means to have a closer look after thorough preparation of what the world out there offers and which experience may be relevant when you look at how life in Ukraine can be improved, how democracy can be fostered, and how the rule of law can be improved. I think when we met 2 years ago, and when we had a lengthy debate on February 18th, at a very inconvenient time, I would say, for many, close to the peak of events, we were still in disbelief that what you've been doing and what you are doing is so relevant that it's not a long-term theoretical approach, but it's sort of very real and very close to being implemented and transposed in real life very soon, right now. I think that's possible, while half a year, 2 years ago, I would have thought, as we discussed, this will be, maybe in a few years' time, maybe 2017. Some people said, 2020, then we'll have some change. So this is impressive to see how much of an impact individual action and collective action can have. And I think that's extremely important when we talk about education, because it's really about the individual and not so much about the collective that makes an impact in the way the world turns. And I see this with thorough contemplation. I've worked in Japan for 4 years, and the Japanese approach, which we also discussed at great length, I think is very important, but in the way that collective action is sometimes slowing down change. I would assume that for Ukraine, we need to look out and try to be inclusive and reach out to people who have different views, but not in an absolute way to try to include people who have clearly other views, other preferences, and other opinions that probably cannot be changed, that can be respected, but that not need to be, included in a model that one sees as the base for public life and interaction. Now, on culture, I'm more than happy to say that Austria has been a bit of an exception, because we have had a tradition of spending more public funds on all levels, national, regional, federal and local, more public funds on culture than we have and then we do spend on national defense. Now, a lot of people, when they hear that, they are either frightened or in disbelief, because this may be seen, you know, as rather daring, and daring is, I think, the euphemism for it. But in fact, if we look back, this was an interesting approach at the time of the Cold War, when we had very much different neighbors and we felt differently about our neighbors. But today, it's not the Russian Federation, but it's Austria that is encircled by NATO members. With a certain disregard to Switzerland, of course, and Liechtenstein, yes, two very friendly countries that we have been cooperating for a long time, despite the fact that there was the westernmost province of Austria that in 1921 had a referendum on joining Switzerland. But I think Switzerland was friendly enough not to accept you. Yes, not to follow up on that, but I think it's not a model for others. But in that respect, it is interesting to see how some of the facts are perceived, because I would have never thought that the Russian Federation feels encircled by anyone being as large as it is. If you look at the map, it wouldn't come to your mind. Now, talking about NATO, just one item. Austria is not a NATO member, but we very actively cooperate with NATO in the form of Partnership for Peace, just like other countries, and Ukraine do in many ways. So I think that is also important to understand and see that there are many forms to interact with international organizations, NATO being a very specific one, certainly, but there are many ways beyond and below membership that I think provide for meaningful cooperation in the interest of everybody involved. I think NATO is very happy with the Ukrainian capacities in many areas, certainly in airlift, air transportation, and others. I think that is something that we see as a strong element of Austria, is very much compatible with NATO operations. We've been involved in many in the Western Balkans, but also in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, and in other places where we have capacities and competences and where our contribution makes a change. Now, before I speak too long, I'll just have a few words on how much education I think is making a difference in your lives, how much it has in mine. And I think coming back to the message of having teams with different backgrounds interacting on a certain joint objective, I would just like to compare with the way the Austrian Embassy works. We have a very small team, actually. I have a lot of employees who are dedicating their time to visa work, something that I would assume will change in the very near future, when we will have more capacity to work on other public diplomacy and cultural projects. But that, I think, is something that we look forward to. Myself, I studied commerce and history. My deputy is a lawyer and a medical doctor. And then we have a few other people who have very complementary talents. But I think with sort of the team, the groups, most of the embassy's work, I think we subscribe to a very interdisciplinary approach. I think diplomacy very much is about that, and if we look at the background of the people here present, I think we see that. I think that is extremely important, and that makes your work, I think, very important and potentially very effective. This right balance and the mix of skills and knowledge, I think, is the key to succeed as a team, but also individually in your ambitions and in your careers. Maybe just one last thing on how important it is to provide access to education. This is something that in Austria, for instance, we have strongly supported in the 1970s when we introduced the policy that education would be free, also higher education would be free for all. And books, for instance, were free. All books that were used in school became free of charge for everybody. And transportation to school became free for everyone who lived more than 2 kilometers away from school. At the time, 2 kilometers was still acceptable to either walk or take a bike. That would be different today, I would assume. But that is, on education, something that I would like to point out. And talking about Ukraine today, I think there is very good access, certainly in the current situation, because Ukraine has a much higher awareness, and I think Ukrainian students and applicants are probably seeing with very different eyes in most institutions. Another example, we have a few Austrian university teachers here in Ukraine, and one of them who's been working here now for 2 years, applied for scholarships to Harvard University, got accepted, applied for a scholarship to the Academy of Sciences in Vienna, got accepted. So I think Ukraine today is a big advantage for anyone who makes reference and who shows that background, and I think that is something that is also drastically changing, that students, graduates from Ukraine will have much better access, certainly in Europe, but I believe well beyond in their endeavors, and I think this is great. Just one final remark, because we have here in this book topics on history, diplomatic history, on cultural and literature and humanitarian projects, but also on business. And one of the speakers this afternoon, Vladimir Ladenchuk of the largest Austrian bank, Raiffeisenbank, I think he will make reference to what they have been doing, and this is actually one of the largest Austrian projects, I would say, with an impact that goes well beyond 13,000 employees and many former employees who have been trained in a very Austrian way of work in the financial sector. I've had many occasions to visit some of their operations. Their operations center is in Chiasso, with more than 1,000 people working there, being extremely powerful and performative in a way that is perceived well beyond Ukraine in the international headquarters in Vienna. And I think this is one example where we see how powerful Ukraine is and how much can be achieved. And I think this is something that is under the title Adventure Ukraine, because for the banking system, Ukraine has been very much tough ground. I hope that will improve, because I agree with what Jon just said. I think without better rule of law, without a better business climate, the prospects and the perspectives that the free trade agreement offers will be not realized. Many of them are trade related, but I think the best channel of influence would be foreign direct investment, and that will not be there and will not arrive unless the business climate is in the West and the rule of law improves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will have the President of Raiffeisen in Ukraine, Mr. Ladenchuk, this afternoon. So thank you very much. But I wanted also to add something on a personal note. And they're not trying to denationalize us or to assimilate us into, say, German or Hungarian. That would have been a bit more difficult, given the language that they had. And they think beautiful, but a little bit difficult for us. But also, the administration was very competent and certainly no corruption. So these were the two features that we tended to inherit in that part of Ukraine, and that is why actually that part of Ukraine has been sort of a PMO of dignity, self-respect had been maintained a bit more readily. Ottoman Empire was not quite so nice, and certainly Romanov Empire has been, I think, the worst of all the empires that have existed, and therefore this attempt to kind of, re-establish again or expand again failed, and would badly failed. So thank you very, very much. And it was, when you mentioned culture and music, we had heard it a little bit, and we have some reaction on that, but not a reaction against what you said, a reinforcement of what you said. So thank you very much. Now, the ambassador, Jan Tambinski, he accepted with pleasure to be with us today, but giving Warsaw and Poroshenko another priority had appeared, and therefore he could not attend, but we are very grateful to the deputy of Jan Tambinski who had agreed to come and speak to us instead. We made a bit of a mistake. We did not print the program in English for this part, which is taking part in English, but in Ukrainian, and the transcription of names from, say, English or Latin to Cyrillic is a very awkward process. This is what the Soviet regime had imposed on us, and it's a terrible thing. So I'll try to pronounce your name, but if I'm wrong, you excuse me, because Frelesen. Thank you very much. And it is on a topic that is actually the main purpose of this conference. Youth is a moving force. Participation of the youth in the elections of 2015. So you're really hitting it right on the heart of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As you said, Ambassador Trubisky regrets that he couldn't be here today, but it's fortunate for me because I've just arrived here recently. And I'm very happy to, as one of my first participation in the public event, that this should be on the subject of education and youth, because I think it's a very important one. It's one of the most important ones in the relations between the EU and the Ukraine, so I'm happy to contribute. The topic is maybe a bit provocative, elections 2015, but I think it probably was done a bit deliberately, so let me give it a shot. And also be relatively brief, so we'll leave some time for questions and comments that people may have, also to what has been said earlier. So yes, youth as a driving force for change, I think this is very true everywhere, and it's certainly true here in Ukraine, as we have seen in the developments that have taken place over the past months here. Everything that had happened over the past month has happened because of the very active participation of young people in Ukraine. And you have kind of shown the world, and also to yourself in your country, how you can change the direction of where you're going, or at least initiate this change. And this activism also seems to have had an influence in the participation of elections, where we have seen a significant increase in the participation of young people going and taking part in elections, and that's a very positive development. Nevertheless, there's probably scope for doing even more, and to working to get young people more involved in the political process in Ukraine. You can ask yourself, how do you do this? There's certainly a scope for more awareness increasing among young people, you know, how you get involved and how you can influence the policy at official level. There perhaps could be a change in the youth policy that the authorities are implementing. This is something where the EU and its member states have some experience, and also other countries, the donor community has a lot of experience to share with authorities. And political parties themselves also can play a more active role in inviting young people to participate, in making it more interesting and attractive, and to get young people involved at a very early stage. And then, of course, civil society as such has a very important role here. As we have seen recently, civil society in Ukraine is very active. and also getting young people engaged in political processes is very important. We see that civil society in Ukraine is one of the most active participants also in the EU Eastern Partnership Program, also in those aspects that are directed at young people, the youth in action programs. And these initiatives are aimed at helping to improve the political culture among young people, which could have quite a significant impact, especially also in the regions, various regions of Ukraine, where this is perhaps even more necessary. Educational institutions such as universities also have an important role to play, of course, as they traditionally have done in EU member states. There are plenty of ways of doing this, including establishing debating fora and political clubs where young people can come and initiate and begin to participate in political debates. The international community, the EU and other donor countries can do a lot, and we are doing a lot, and we want to do more in terms of supporting youth initiatives in Ukraine. I'm sure you're aware of the various programs that the EU has, and I don't want to bore you with the detail, but I think I just want to highlight some few examples. Especially the new Erasmus Plus program is a very important one, where the EU, in a reinforced program, will offer more opportunities and benefits for student mobility, academic cooperation and youth exchanges. I myself, when I was a student at the University of Copenhagen, I spent part of my studies both in the United States and in Germany, and this is becoming increasingly normal that most people as part of their studies go abroad, either in the EU or outside. It's a very enriching experience, and it's something that stays with you for all your life. Over 4,000 young Ukrainians are expected to benefit from these university exchanges under Erasmus Plus, and it also provides grants for training and teaching opportunities abroad. And as you may know, Ukrainian students and universities will also be eligible for scholarships to follow joint master's degrees offered by a consortia of different European universities. More than 7,000 Ukrainians will also receive EU support to participate in youth exchanges in the so-called European Voluntary Service, all through funding for the mobility of youth workers. Ukraine will also continue to take part in the e-twinning initiative for schools, where more than 100 Ukrainian schools and nearly 300 teachers are already registered since the launch of this initiative in March 2013. I don't want to go into more detail, but let me just say in conclusion, and then maybe let's have a discussion on comments and remarks, that, as I said initially, youth and education is probably one of the most important areas for cooperation between the EU and Ukraine. Ukraine is facing many challenges, and these challenges are going to take a long time to overcome. And the EU and the international community are going to support you in this, but we're not going to be able to do it for you. Ukraine will have to make all the hard choices and the transformation by itself, and this requires also especially that you, the young people, the future generation, is fully involved in the political process. And maybe to answer the question of the elections that are coming up, you can only be encouraged to participate fully, to get active also in political parties, maybe launch new ones if you find the motivation for this. But you are the ones who have the country in your hands, you are the ones who have to get engaged. We can help you, but you have to actually make the change.
When I made a reference that perhaps the reaction of the European Union to, let's say, to Russian aggression, or rather to helping Ukraine with it, was perhaps not quite adequate. I did not mean to sound ungrateful, but as the last elections to the European Parliament showed, the structure, the decision-making structure of the European Union is perhaps not quite right. And there's also, on one side, too much decentralization in the decision-making, in the sense that every country has the veto right on any important decision. When the ministers of foreign affairs meet, and they meet more frequently than once now at any rate, they all have to agree on certain moves, certain decisions. On the other hand, there is a certain kind of feeling of distance in the population of the member countries towards the European Union, toward the European Commission. That was shown by the Eurosceptics that now got elected to the Commission, because really the structure is not adequate. So it's a little bit bold or blunt, maybe even arrogant to say the European Union will need a certain transformation in its structure. A very good attempt was made a number of years ago when a special commission was set up, headed by the former president of France, Giscard d'Estaing. They had 150 people, and they had created sort of a constitution for the European Union. But they had to put it for a vote in all member countries, and France itself and Holland had rejected it. And therefore we are structurally, so to speak, I mean, I'm talking about the power structure, decision-making structure, etc., not in the best of forms. And now a lot of talk about the European Union be also kind of transforming, but certainly, I mean, Ukraine's wish to be associated, at least, the member of the European Union, which will certainly will be qualified for within a decade or so now. So that's what I know, because actually I even worked with that commission on Giscard d'Estaing and so on. So this is, but I maybe could just mention one other comment, that in that context, I had the privilege on the National Day of Switzerland, which is the 1st of August, so I've been asked to make a speech instead of the mayor of the commune in which I lived, which was an exception, of course, that to be debated in the communal council whether we should have a foreigner, not even a Swiss, giving such a speech. And I shocked the members of that commune by saying, well, there was a big debate at that time in Switzerland, should we join the European Union or should we not? And of course, all businesses were for, but a lot of people that were extremely attached to this direct democracy were against. So I was saying Switzerland should not be joining the European Union. It was not called the European Union at that time, by the way, yet. But the European Union should be joining Switzerland, because it should be adopting a bit of a similar structure. So with that, I would like to thank you very much. But since you had mentioned culture, I thought that that would be interesting. We thought about that a little bit before, that to have an element of culture, a cultural interlude. The culture is an extremely important part of the life of a country, of a society. So we are really very much impressed by the fact that you spend more on culture than you spend on defense. I think you're absolutely right. So we'll have, and I must also say that, however, well, we'll have to, I don't know if you should do it, but we can have for a few minutes answers and questions, but I wanted to mention already now, so that you will not run away too quickly, that we'll have a little musical interlude, because while, let's say, after the integration of the Soviet Union, the country has been managed very poorly, but the cultural life has been very buoyant, very dynamic. And it is important, and I thought that again for participants of this program, to remind that culture and generally the aesthetics is also important in creating a new shape of the country. So with that, and we are lucky enough so that we have a professor from another business school, Yale Business School. There she is, and she does some very interesting things. She produces music for corporations with the idea that music will soften their attitudes, make them more humane in dealing with their employees, etc. So that's our professor, but maybe if you can just stay there, because we will ask if there's some questions. This is the time to make yourself heard. Yes?
Пан Богдан Гаврилович, thank you for your support, for your trust, for your investments, and for our common dreams. We will do our best to fulfill our common dreams. And thank you, Pani Irene, Your Excellencies, thank you for your trust to us. And I have a question, some specific maybe to Mr. Schönenberger, about electronic democracy in Switzerland. I know that it works in some cantons, and maybe it can be some partial solutions for our country, for our special territories which have some difficult electoral situation right now. How it works, why it is not developed further, and like your thoughts on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Actually, the electronic democracy in Switzerland, as many things, is again bottom-up. So that's, for instance, in the last votes we had, I was voting by letter, my wife was voting electronically, because she is announced in another canton than I am. But I think there will be a development. I think electronic voting has a big potential. And looking at the last elections you had here in the East, if people could have voted in Donetsk and Luhansk over their PCs, you would have had a much higher turnout. So I think, yes, electronic voting has a big potential. In Switzerland, still some people have doubts. There's some lingering doubts about possible manipulations. People feel more secure if they really can put their own vote into a voting box, or also letter voting is well accepted. But I think it's a matter of time until electronic voting will be more prominent.
Thank you. There is a man behind. We have to give gender equality here. Microphone.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a question about energy independence of Europe. As I know, there are a lot of programs, and I would ask about one program that was in the France about Phoenix and Super Phoenix fusion reactors. So this reactors was closed, and I guess if you know about these programs, maybe you can make some comments why this program was closed and etc. It was developed in the 90s years, and it was about fusion reactors on fast meters.
Is the question addressed to Ambassador Ferguson?
Yes, it would be.
Would you?
I can be very quick, because I have to tell you, I'll have to get back to you on this, but I didn't catch the exact name of the program you mentioned, so I'll come to you afterwards and get it, and then I will have to get back to you.
One other question. There is a lady here. Victoria.
Thank you so much for those beautiful sharings with your experiences of your countries. I'm very glad to be the part of this event. And I have a question to Mr. Ambassador from Switzerland. I've been a part of a group researching this country, and I came out with many ideas, and many believe that we can take a lot of experience of Switzerland and implement it here back in Ukraine. And my question is following. In Ukraine, we tend to think that our national identity is rooted in the language. So if language is kind of a clue for people to understand that we are one nation, even though we have some problems with this issue. In Switzerland, people sometimes even do not understand each other if they are living in different cantons, if they study in schools different languages. And I was told that very often English is becoming more common language to speak between people, between queues, who are living in different cantons. not something that should be you know, like a clue for a nation. So what are the bases for this national identity of Swiss people?
I'm sure that the answer will be shorter than the question.
Well, thank you. Very good question. I think how can you build national identities in pluralistic societies? And Ukraine is very much a diverse society, linguistically diverse, also religiously diverse. And in such countries, you cannot just build your identity and your feeling of togetherness on language, because it would be exclusive to all those who are not in this ethnic group. So in Switzerland, we see our identity as built on the will to live together. Sometimes we say it's a nation of will. It's the joint political approach to have a state in which everybody shares and where everybody feels at home, and where people feel that they can build the future and the policies that they like. And this creates the cohesion and the loyalty to the state. It's not language.
Well, I would very much like to welcome here Cardinal Meruza, who our greatest spiritual and moral authority in Ukraine, but it goes beyond the borders, who has been with this program for the very beginning, so is in a sense angel protector of this program. So I wanted to welcome you, Ocholadeko. And now, if I can pass it to you, Lumera, if you want to say a few words, and then we'll have that musical interlude.
Dear Dmitrovich, dear dear colleagues and Your Excellency, Your Excellency Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really very proud and happy to be here, and well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's really great to see such lots of young faces and shining eyes, yeah, and your shining eyes, because it's, you know, it's a two-way road. And I would like to say that it happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago, that when we were together in the Philharmonic and listening to a classical music concert, Madame Luther said that it would be very nice if we would have an opportunity to hear a real live music here, when you will hear this music, because for you, especially for you young people, because music is an extremely powerful force, transformational force that can really change the world. And why do you really need, why you intensely need to listen to classical music? Because music is all about fundamental values like freedom, like love, like unity. It's all about leadership, so and passion for the dream. You can all, everybody listening to music can find yourself in the music, because music speaks directly to your heart. It's from heart to heart, as Beethoven said. And he also said that music is even more deep revelation than wisdom and philosophy, because philosophy could be kind of mental, sophisticated schemes or models, and music is always true. It's speaking the truth. And I think if you look at this, yes,
we should hear the music.
Yes, music is coming. I would like to invite beautiful musicians, young and energetic musicians, and please invite them here. This is a chamber orchestra. The name of each of it is Arteharta, and the artistic, please come here. And the artistic director of it is Miroslava Petrovic, a bright star of Ukrainian violin. This will be a suite of olden times, Holberg time, and it will be like 5 dances of Bach's times, please.
Дуже дякую за чудову музику. Де мати приємність ще раз вас почути. And now we'll have, I would say, a physiological break for about 10 minutes. And then after another session will start. We'll shift to Ukrainian. And it will be moderated by Alexandra. She is from Luhansk. She leads a very special program at the Ukrainian Catholic University Master's Program in Lviv. She is the person that has actually built up tremendously this another very important student organization, ISAC, starting in 1994. So, and she is a wonderful friend. So, thank you so far, and particularly those that will leave us now. Again, thank you, ambassadors. Thank you for inspiring us with some comments. And, well, we look forward to continued cooperation with you. So, thank you, and enjoy yourself if you can in the next 10 minutes. Bye. Oh yeah, I forgot, there are some people from the media, so if they wish to interview somebody, etc., do it outside.
Шановні учасники, ще, будь ласка, прошу хвилину вашої уваги і особливо уваги представників медіа.